So we're looking at Night Presence 2, a monumental 20th century sculpture by Louise Nevelson. Nevelson is a Russian-born sculptor and strong personality who moved to New York City early on in her artistic career and spent 60 plus years there pursuing her interests. Now, Nevelson is most well known for her large-scale wood constructions, box forms that she piled on top of each other to create these large walls of art. Obviously, what we're looking at here is slightly different. This work was done later in her artistic career, in the 1970s when the artist herself was in her 70s. And as we can see, it's not made of wood. It's made from steel, and unlike her wall pieces, which were literally connected to the environment in which they were in, this is a freestanding sculptural form. But like her earlier pieces, when we look at it, we can see these elements of architectural forms, these moldings and banister fragments that she found in ruined buildings, and by going to furniture shops, she would literally go to these sites and collect these objects, some of which she put directly into her pieces. But in the case of this sculpture that we're looking at, she used these forms as a reference and created her shapes from those ideas. This idea of found object art goes back to the early 20th century. We're looking at the artists like Marcel Duchamp and Picasso who found pieces and created art from them. So Nevelson is borrowing from this idea, but she's making it her own. She puts a story into it, and she's taking it into the later 20th century. All of these pieces that we see, these shapes and these forms, are assembled into a series that then is covered in a uniform color. In most of her work, what we see is it's uniform black, white, or gold. In this work, obviously, we're looking at a different color. It's this rusty red, and this is created because this is an outdoor work. This work has been in the elements, and as such, it's been affected. Nevelson enjoyed this aspect of her sculptural work because, as she said, it really gave a life to the work itself. It was a living work. It looks like a purely abstract work until we look more closely and we realize it really does have reference to the visual world. Not just these architectural elements, but every single work that she does has a narrative behind it. And when we look more closely at the forms in this piece, we see that the shapes and the forms create a silhouette that sort of references the idea of a skyline. And this skyline is perhaps the skyline of New York City or some element of that skyline. As I mentioned, a city that is close to her heart, one where she spent most of her life. And as she put it, she saw New York City itself as one big, great sculpture. And many of her works reference that city. So at first glance, it seems like this may be a symmetrical piece, but then we look closer and we realize it's actually asymmetrical, it's unbalanced, which connects again with that idea of a skyline. It really ties in with the authenticity of a skyline not being a perfect symmetrical form. And of course, it's made of steel, so like a towering skyscraper, it launches out of the sculpture court here and becomes a skyscraper made of steel in the heart of Balboa Park. Now, Nevelson was a very independent mind. She is known for her eccentric personality, and she was a force. But in some ways, she had to be. She was a female artist in a time when female artists were struggling for recognition, so she had to make herself known. And through works like this one and the earlier works that I mentioned, she really made an impact, and she paved her way as an artist. She also paved the way for future installation artists. Her works really started that trend. So she continues today to be celebrated for all that she's done and to be celebrated as a sculptor and a great artist of the 20th century.